this last Saturday night at UFC 252, it was arguably one of the most entertaining cards that the UFC has put on since the COVID shutdown ceased operations this last spring. Now, as always, I'm going to hold myself accountable by giving you what I got right and what I got wrong as far as the picks go from last week for the card. And I'm Jordan Kurtz with comments from the Peanut Gallery as well as the MMA plug. So without further ado, let's take a look. Now, starting off in the main event, if we're taking a look at the Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier matchup, I said the younger legs and more physically fit champ gets it done, and still accurate in that one. Stipe closed the book on this clash of these heavyweight titans in this trilogy matchup here. His athleticism was a huge factor within this fight. He was able to use his footwork and be able just to move in and out of those exchanges. He did wear some shots. He's got a chin that is just granite. That's why it was crazy that he got clipped so easily in that first matchup, in my opinion, because this is, mind you, the guy who was able to eat a shot for Francis Ngannou back in 2018. Now, for what it's worth, both guys got eye poked. I'm not gonna not make a statement on this video without addressing the eye poke, but it's like everybody that's out there is forgetting that Stipe was eye poked so bad in the first two fights that he eventually needed to have surgery, which prolonged this final trilogy bout. He also was the first one within this fight to get poked. DC, yes, he got poked and it was bad, but you could also make the argument that if you take a look at DC starting the third round, that his eye was already in Fucksville at that point. Stipe damn near finished him at the end of the second round, and Daniel was visibly hurt to start that third round. The eye poke didn't help. There's no denying that. But at the end of the day, it is fighting, and that is something that happens. And again, DC is not innocent in the equation because he did it multiple times to Stipe throughout this trilogy. Also said, Father Time is undefeated, and at the age of 41, DC has a lot of miles on his body, which I think that held true. DC fought very hard, and he looked to be right at the edge of that cliff of where you really start to see a steep downfall as far as the age cliff. There was a couple of times where he showed signs of an aging fighter where, in my opinion, it looked like he was hesitant to pull the trigger, whereas, say in the past, DC never has to worry about that. That's something that he just reacts and he goes. There was also those clinch situations up against the cage where he was giving up the double underhooks, his arms were being kept up, being held high. The former Olympian didn't used to get out-grappled in that regard, and he did on Saturday night. Now, that could be a factor of multiple things. It could be the age, it could be the injuries that have piled up through the years. Who knows? All we know is that Stipe Miocic retained that title as being the baddest man on the planet and retaining that UFC Heavyweight Championship gold. Moving on into the next matchup, there was Sugar Sean O'Malley and Marlon Chito Vera. I said that Chito is one of the most exciting bantamweights to watch because he brings it every single time. He's won 5 of the last 6, all by finish, and he's never been finished. His willingness to bang it out and his high-level jiu-jitsu makes him easily the toughest test for O'Malley, who is on the fast track to a title shot. He comes to throw the F down, and he wants to put on a show. Well, that was true. Chito put on a sweet but sugar-free performance on Saturday night. He derailed the hype train that's Sugar Sean O'Malley. People will point at the injury, but you also have to take into consideration that Chito is what caused that injury. The calf kick that he had just prior to Sean taking that step forward and rolling over with his ankle basically shut down the nerves, or it hit the switch that shut the nerves down to the lower portion of his leg. This is something that I encourage you, if you're thinking that I'm full of it, go look up the Henry Cejudo versus Demetrius Johnson 2 fight and see how the first portion of that fight went, or the first sequence went when Henry had his ankle. Look at the Brent Primus versus Michael Chandler example in Bellator. It happens. That's just part of what you're up against with that particular strike. You know, Chito is, he's a savvy vet. He was in Sean's face and was never not in that fight the entire time. Some people, you know, a lot of the fanboys for Sean are, oh, well, it was clearly Sean's up to that point. No, it wasn't. And we've also never seen Sean get drug into deep water. You have to give credit to where credit is due and give Chito the recognition for this win. Because everybody is going to look for all the reasons to give Sean excuses, but to me, my estimation of Sugar Sean O'Malley as a man significantly fucking plummeted on Saturday night, seeing him get carted off on a stretcher for a lower limb injury in that regard. Now, I understand that he was injured. I do recognize that he was actually hurt. However, he could have went out on the one good leg and walked off, you know, just warrior code, warrior spirit in that way. You know, he kind of looked soft. That was some NBA shit, soft as baby shit, having to be stretchered off. Whereas you see others like Macy Barber, for example, who shredded her knee against Roxanne Modafferi. She walked off with, albeit with the aid of her team, and it's not saying that you can't have aid of the team, but just the spirit of the warrior. You didn't let someone cart you off for a leg injury. Just my thoughts, you know, maybe call it a little bit draconian or, you know, hard with the times, but I'm old school in that regard, in that you would have, I don't know, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. But moving to the next matchup. Oh, also as far as what I got right, yes, I gave Sean the nod as far as my official pick goes, but I put my money on Chito because the odds were just straight up disrespectful. And even though I lost, I still won because that's what I put my money on. Now, taking a look at JDS, Junior Dos Santos against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, you do have the one shot, one kill type of dangerous fighter in Rozenstruik. His only loss was the 22nd knockout to Francis Ngannou, and he stopped every heavyweight, or all these heavyweight fixtures such as Alistair Overeem and Andrei Arlovsky. You add to the mix his 90 kickboxing fights, technically 85, but we'll just round up to 90 for example's sake. And you take all that into the mix, and you've got one very, very dangerous fighter on the feet. That's exactly what it was. Rozenstruik is definitely dangerous, and he looked to be comfortable the entire time standing there exchanging with the former world champion in Junior Dos Santos. Dos Santos looked to be like he was in great physical shape, but he just really didn't have an answer to the volume and the pressure that Rozenstruik had. Rozenstruik had, you know, 60-some significant strikes that he landed at a very high percentage, and you know, Junior is those same sort of aging signs that we kind of spoke to or alluded to with Cormier. I think that those conversations have to be had with Junior as well, because that's now 3 straight losses by knockout. Albeit first 2 were Curtis Blades and Francis Ngannou, but you add another killer in the mix like Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Brain damage is brain damage. How far along do you want to push it? Now, if we are taking a look at the next matchup, that was John Dodson against Merab Dvalishvili. Merab is a takedown monster. They don't call John Dodson the magician for nothing. Pretty accurate there. Merab attempted 20 takedowns in the fight, and Dodson was able to successfully defend 18 of them. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. This was a very weird performance from John Dodson, in my opinion. John Dodson was very low volume, low output, did not have a whole lot of bounce to his step the way that he normally does when he's in there in the cage. I thought that there was going to be a chance that John Dodson might be able to use some of that explosive athleticism to catch Merab on the way in with one of those takedown attempts, and potentially maybe looking at, you know, a flying knee or something to that effect. But John just never really got going. So, you know, there's going to be a little bit more on that later. I said that the safe pick would be Merab by decision. That is what I had with my money as far as that regard goes. The machine plugged away to a clear-cut decision. The scary thing is, Merab brought it to everybody's attention that he is now finally able to quit his construction job to be a full-time fighter. He's only been training once a day up to this point. Most full-time fighters are training twice a day, bare minimum, you know, on most of their work days. I think that's scary to know what Merab might eventually become once he puts in all the extra time and effort. There's a couple of 35 killers over there at Longo Serra BJJ in Long Island, and that's both him as well as his good buddy that was in his corner, Aljamain Sterling. The next matchup was Jim Miller against Vinc from Hell Pichel. Now, on last week's episode of the MMA Plug Show, I pegged this as the matchup to keep your eyes out on that had that has the potential for a fight of the night sort of feel. Not a bad assessment there, but as far as the write-up goes, nothing. I didn't get nothing right. Not a damn thing. Moving on to the next one. Lavinia Souza against Ashley Yoder. I said that the over is tasty since Yoder is tough to finish, but definitely hammer the Souza money line. Now, as wrong as I was in the write-up for the Miller and Pichel matchup, was as right as I was in this one. Because the Brazilian gangster Souza, she definitely handily won that decision against Ashley Yoder. I like Ashley Yoder. Ashley Yoder is a tough opponent. But Souza is, she's only had 2 losses in her entire professional career. She was an Invicta World Champion. It was a good night overall for former Invicta World Champions. Her fellow Brazilian also had success. We'll get to that later. And, I called the money line as well as calling the over, so boom shakalaka. Herbert Burns against Daniel Pineda. You have a game veteran who's only gotten better with time. Pineda will certainly be the toughest test of Burns' career. To quote Daniel Pineda, he took his balls on Saturday night. He broke the will of Herbert Burns in the cage en route to that TKO decision, and Herbert Burns he looked like a guy who missed weight by a lot, whose body just went through hell, because he had 0 explosion. He had about 1 good scramble where he was able to kind of get the back for a second of Pineda, but aside from that, he just really had nothing behind anything that he was doing. He defended okay for a while, but just was unable to mount any sort of offense, was eventually put in that crucifix position, and Pineda went to work. He broke his will. Like you say, he took his balls right there in that position. Felice Herrig against Virna Jandiroba. And I'm totally butchering her name. However, she's for real. I said that she is for real, and that if Felice is not ready, this is going to be Amanda Ribas versus Paige Van Zandt all over again. Now, you won't make much money with this pick, but it was one that was going to be arguably the greatest lock for a return on the entire night. That was true. Virna made light work. She made absolute light work of Felice and submitted her within the first 2 minutes of that fight. Took her down right from the get-go, and then was able to submit her with an armbar. Virna did open up in the post-fight interviews and press conferences stating that she wanted to get it to the ground right away because she actually sustained an injury a couple of weeks ago in camp, and she knocked out her front 2 teeth. And she didn't want to risk staying standing with a striker like Felice because she didn't want to take the risk that her teeth would get knocked out again. So right away, she even had the Funky Ben Askren style haircut. She went Funky Ben style, shot the takedown right away from the opening touch, and was able to have her will with her opponent on the ground, en route to getting that dominant finish, as well as picking up a nice $50K bonus. She said that she wants to fight on Fight Island. That'll be allegedly in the fall. The UFC has not made an official statement on that, but I have it on good faith that it's probably going to be sometime in the fall that they make the return for those next few shows. TJ Brown versus Danny Chavez. I said that if Chavez can pull the muscled up Brown into deep water and get him tired the way that Jordan Griffin was able to do, it will be a good night for Chavez. Keep your eye on the over for this one. That might be the best play for this matchup. TJ Brown fought tough, and he did have some pretty stinging body shots, especially the kicks in that 3rd round, but as the fight drew later and later, the more it favored Chavez. Chavez, by the last minute of the fight, was clearly in the driver's seat, as noted also by the commentary team that said that, hey, he just needs to be careful and not put himself in too much of harm's way, risking the potential damage and possibly getting knocked out in that last final sequence because he had the decision wrapped up. Now, this went to the decision. This covered the over. if you follow my advice, you go and sizzle with this pick. Chris Daukaus against Parker Porter. I said, we may see the big boys throwing heavy hammers right away from the get-go. Neither of them likes to go to the cards, and they each have finishes both by KO, TKO, and submission. From the opening bell, it was pretty apparent that this one wasn't going to go to the cards. They were throwing heavyweight heat, and Chris Daukaus find his mark more often, more than Parker Porter did. Philadelphia police officer Daukaus was able to nab that UFC debut win, unlike his younger brother Kyle Daukaus, who made his first appearance back in June against Brennan Allen. Kai Kamaka against Tony Kelley. What I said was Kamaka has collegiate level wrestling that pairs well with his island scrapper mentality. I've said it before and I'll say it again, those Hawaii boys can bang. Give me the fight in Hawaiian in this one. Kudos to Kai Kamaka III and Tony Kelley, who each picked up a $50K bonus for the fight of the night and their UFC debut for the curtain puller at UFC 252. This was the second war in 2 weeks that Kai Kamaka has been in, so hopefully getting that bonus is going to be a nice little cash flow cushion for him to just rest and heal up the body, you know. Shout out also to Mike Stack, who we went to war with a couple weeks ago, you know. That dude is a real scrapper. I'm impressed by Kai Kamaka so far, just in his toughness alone and his willingness just to go out there and just to throw down. I look forward to this kid's future. On the flip side, we've talked about what I've got right. Now let's take a look at what I got wrong. In the Stipe versus DC matchup, I said that the cage and the wrestling prowess of Cormier is certainly an advantage. You know, make no mistake about it, Stipe can wrestle. For months, Daniel has said that he hopes that Stipe brings his wrestling shoes. After that first takedown where Stipe got right back up, he attempted one and that was it. He didn't do any more wrestling for the remainder of the entire fight. He basically abandoned that from his game plan. I said, pour some sugar on me. Well, shit the bed and fell in on that one. Because Sean obviously didn't get the TKO or the KO in that regard, and he got stretchered off like a little bitch. So, shame on me. I'm off the hype train. Junior Dos Santos and Jairzinho Rozenstruik. I said I'm going against the grain here, and I'm taking a chance on JDS. It's not that Junior looked all that bad, he just looked past his prime. His technical skill and veteran savvy gave me some faith that he would be able to avoid the storm from Rozenstruik and eventually be able to pick him apart. But Biggie Boy, he was just, you know, his 42 significant strikes landed at a 63% rate were just way too much for the elder former champion to be able to handle. John Dodson against Merab Dvalishvili said, if you're feeling froggy, and this is what I alluded to earlier, that it's not out of the cards to think that a Dodson finish could happen. You know, we've seen flying knees happen on takedown attempts. We've seen just, you know, the reckless abandon. Sometimes it happened with takedown artists and guys who have explosive striking. But that didn't happen in this matchup because John Dodson just never really got going. In the Jim Miller versus Vinc Pichel fight, I said that this one is going to come down to the cage time and the experience for me. I'm riding with Miller, and don't be surprised if he finds a submission. This almost came true. Almost. Pichel said himself in the post-fight press conference that the guillotine was deep, in that it was a couple of seconds of tapping or from being put to sleep, because he said that if he didn't get his head out, that the end was near. But he was able to, and ultimately picked up the win. So hey, hats off to From Hell Pichel. That dude is tough. In the Souza and Yoder fight, not a nail now, not a. If you're the first person to send me a message with what that reference is from, I'll send you a gift card. Herbert Burns versus Daniel Pineda. I said, I like Burns in this one. This one burned me. Get it? Now, Herbert Burns really only had a couple of positive moments in this fight, like we said, and it just looked awful. That was a very terrible performance for someone who missed weight by an absurd amount, and you know, he made nothing on that fight considering he's on his first contract and he had to kick up 30% right off the top to his opponent. Not a good night for the younger Burns brother. Felice Herrig against Jandiroba. I said Souza versus Yoder explanation. I hit the nail on the head with this one, and I won nicely on the bets from it. Give me my money. TJ Brown and Donnie Chavez, nothing. Hit the head on the money line and on the over. Chris Daukaus and Parker Porter. I said Porter's well-rounded game finds a way. I gave the nod to the guy with more experience, the guy who's fought a John Jones and Gabriel Gonzaga at certain points of his career, but Daukaus was a more violent fighter. Plain and simple. He got it done when he needed to, and once he smelled blood in the water with Porter, he pounced on it and he didn't let up. Shout out to Chris Daukaus. Unloaded some bombs for the TKO. And then Kamaka versus Tony Kelley. Said Tony Kelley has not fought since May of 2019, so the time off is definitely something that will likely play a role in the 33-year-old 5-1 Louisiana fighter's performance. Though Kelley lost, and I did predict Kamaka to win, I didn't expect Kelley to put on a fight of the night type of performance. You know, they both were rookies as far as the UFC goes. The two debutantes walked away with the $50K bonus, which is incredible. That's what a stamp to put on your debut. That's incredible to me to see what those two guys were able to do in that regard. Overall, UFC 252 was a very entertaining card. It was great to watch, and can't wait to do it for the next card. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Jordan Kurtz with comments for the Peanut Gallery and the MMA Plug. Give us a shout. Thank you very much.